Those who live in despair cannot imagine a future beyond their suffering, at least not without significant sacrifice. They mistake permanence for truth and agony for identity. And the students of Hope's Peak Academy knew this all too well. Each of them was chosen for their ultimate ability, yet they're trapped in a killing game designed to strip away their humanity. But in the presence of such a cruel reality, some chose to continue to believe. To believe, a common infinitive often tossed around in platitudes, but in Danganronpa, belief is nothing less than the refusal to surrender to entropy. It is a conscious act of choosing a reality beyond despair, even when all evidence points towards hopelessness. Each character at some point is given a choice: to fall into self-preserving nihilism or to confront the abyss and walk forward anyway. But that choice isn't always clean, and the line between surrender and survival often blurs more than it defines. Sometimes, hope takes the form of compromise more than triumph. In the end, people are set apart by their refusal to give up, even as their faith begins to falter. Even the premise is ultimately designed to breed doubt amongst the cast and test their belief in people they've only just met. It's a setting in which 15 high school students are trapped within the walls of an elite academy known as Hope's Peak. Their captor is a sadistic bear named Monokuma being controlled by the mastermind. The rules are simple. The only way to escape is to become labeled as a blackened by murdering a classmate and surviving a class trial without being caught. The remaining students must uncover the culprit or face execution themselves. Beyond its motifs of murder and mystery, Danganronpa is a meditation on perspective. It teaches that hope and despair are mirrors where each is defined by the other. The main proclamation being that hope is the radical act of standing tall despite despair, and not necessarily the ignorance of it. In this way, the narrative refuses a black and white moral structure. Even the most despair-ridden villain in Junko is often the most idealistic, in that she's twisted by the belief that despair is more honest than hope. Junko Enoshima stands as ultimate despair incarnate, and her philosophy reveals what Danganronpa truly means when it speaks of despair as a force that consumes human existence. Those who cling to hope, talent, or admiration reveal themselves as the weakest of all because they have already succumbed to the very thing they claim to oppose. The craving for hope emerges from a place of despair, and the craving for despair emerges from a place of hope. Hope and talent become crutches for those who feel the ground shifting beneath them. They are shields raised against an indifferent world that promises nothing. Blankets pulled over heads by children who believe darkness cannot find them in their hiding places. When Junko dissects these concepts, she reveals a worldview where desire and suffering blur until they become indistinguishable. By this line of reasoning, the very act of desiring already renders you weak, because if you crave something, whether meaning or connection, you have already let despair in through the back door. That desire, she believes, is weakness itself. She acknowledges that despair requires hope to exist, shadows needing light to define their boundaries. Instead of interpreting that dependence as something meaningful, she interprets it as a reason to reject hope entirely and cut it out at the root. In doing so, she looks upon the mirror's darkest side and asks a question that the series seeks to answer. If hope and despair always walk hand in hand through life, then what's the point of hoping at all? Her argument becomes fatalistic because it renders the struggle itself meaningless. The effort to hope becomes another form of suffering because hoping requires acknowledging that you lack what you hope for. Through this lens, every positive emotion becomes tainted by the recognition of what you do not have. Life becomes a matter of never hoping, so you can never be disappointed. Despair becomes both floor and ceiling, creating a prison where walls reflect only emptiness back at those trapped within. Security through nihilism becomes her fortress, built on the foundation that nothing matters, so nothing can wound you. Junko's constantly shifting personalities serve as the perfect vehicle for this nihilistic philosophy, each facet reflecting a different angle of the same fundamental emptiness. Her mood swings between bubbly fashionista, analytical mastermind, and sadistic torturer reveal someone who has internalized the meaninglessness she preaches. If nothing has inherent value, then identity itself becomes just another performance, another costume to be worn and discarded at will. Her personality shifts through the consistency of believing that no authentic self exists beneath the mask we wear. Each personality she adopts is equally hollow, equally disposable, because in her worldview, authenticity is just another illusion that causes suffering when it's inevitably stripped away. This performative fluidity, in a sense, becomes her ultimate expression of despair, as she has dissolved the very concept of a stable self because even personal identity, she believes, is a source of false hope that must be abandoned to achieve true freedom from suffering. For Junko, despair represents humanity's truest nature because it destroys illusions and forces confrontation with reality stripped of hope's comforting lives. Through despair, she believes, humans can finally stop pretending their lives hold meaning beyond the suffering they endure. Stop reaching for things that will only cause more pain when they inevitably slip away. The truth they say will set you free, but in Danganronpa, truth is a double-edged knife. Sharp enough to reveal, cruel enough to wound. It strips away comfort, peels back delusion, and demands that you feel something in its wake. Because here, truth isn't the end of the road, it's the beginning of a choice. The characters are constantly confronted by truth, and this truth is initially viewed as the ultimate goal. On the surface, this suggests a clear formula: find the truth and survive. But the series consistently subverts this. It reminds us that truth alone is not salvation. You can discover who the killer is, who the mastermind is, even who you are, and still be destroyed by that knowledge. Across each case, the revelation of truth does not bring peace. It brings pain, guilt, and irreversible change. Makoto learning the truth about Sayaka's death and the underpinnings of betrayal in an attempt to frame him for her planned murder doesn't lead to catharsis, but to disillusionment. Mondo's confession and death after murdering Chihiro expose how fragile masculinity and shame can warp a man in spite of his bold facade. Celeste's cold ambition is unmasked, but it offers no moral clarity, only despair at how dreams curdle under pressure. Sakura's noble suicide is a heartbreaking reminder that sometimes the truth comes too late to matter, further emphasized by her suicide note being forged by Monokuma in order to sow discord. Even the final revelation that Junko manipulated everything for despair doesn't liberate the survivors. It merely shows them how deep the abyss goes. The people killed will never be brought back. The guilt carried by the survivors lingers long after the trial's end, and the innocence lost in the face of such cruelty can never truly be reclaimed. The sixth trial of Danganronpa delivers devastation in waves, with each revelation more crushing than the last. The students discover that their imprisonment came by their own consent, agreed to over 2 forgotten years. During that lost time, they had woven genuine friendships and bonds, only to have those memories severed. The people they had feared and suspected were once their closest companions. Beyond even this betrayal lies a greater truth. The world outside has already collapsed, consumed by the tragedy. A global wave of despair so overwhelming it brought civilization to its knees. No help approaches, no home awaits their return. Hope's Peak Academy, once a symbol of elite potential, has become the stage for a slow, curated breakdown of trust. In the span of a single trial, every comforting assumption about their past and their future crumbles to ash. Despite this, the game remains hopeful. The overwhelmingly consistent thematic message lies in what you do after the truth is revealed. That next step, however painful, defines your arc. Makoto Naegi embodies this philosophy completely. He begins as the ultimate lucky student, a title that feels almost mocking in a school full of prodigies. His defining trait is his ordinariness, yet the narrative transforms this apparent weakness into his greatest strength. In a system where talent determines value, Makoto's lack of specialization becomes his greatest asset. He connects with others because of his averageness, his empathy unclouded by ego, his belief in others becoming the heart of a resistance in a game built on fear and suspicion. When Makoto chooses to believe that Sayaka left her dying message to protect him, even as he quietly wishes he were wrong just so her betrayal would not be real, he chooses understanding over bitterness. He sees what drove them to that point: fear and desperation born from the unbearable isolation of the killing game. Later, when he uses Sayaka's old line in a moment of warmth with Kyoko, the gesture becomes an act of honoring who Sayaka was, beyond how she died. Makoto chooses to carry her memory forward without letting the sadness he feels for what happened define him. Hina, shattered by Sakura's death and consumed by guilt, initially responds with anger and a desire for revenge. Her grief nearly drives her to orchestrate a mass suicide, convinced that the group must pay for what she sees as their collective role in Sakura's despair. But ultimately, she chooses forgiveness for her classmates and herself. She realizes that clinging to hatred and blame only continues the cycle Sakura sacrificed herself to end. This transformation happens because of Makoto. When Hina attempts to turn despair into punishment, Makoto stops her with quiet clarity. He appeals to empathy rather than logic, reminding her that Sakura's intention was unity, reorienting the entire group. His words carry emotional truth rather than intellectual weight. That makes his hope powerful. It stems from the unwavering belief that people are still worth believing in, even when they falter. This pattern emerges subtly in nearly every character's actions, including those who fall into despair. Danganronpa divides its cast into people who are choosing to move toward or away from hope. Even those lost along the way reveal traces of hope in their final acts. Sayaka, after her desperate plan to kill Leon and escape fails, writes his name in blood to protect Makoto from being falsely accused. Mondo Owada, tormented by guilt over Chihiro's death, sabotages his own plan by moving the body to the girl's locker room. A risky decision that delays his escape but ensures Chihiro's secret is protected. Celeste, arguably the most cold and opportunistic student, still gives Makoto the key he needs to access alter ego. These moments, however small, show that even those lost to despair still carry within them a spark of humanity. The same proves true of those who struggle in quieter ways. Sakura Ogami, once the enforcer of the mastermind, ultimately breaks down the very doors she was ordered to guard. Her betrayal of Monokuma becomes an act of faith in her classmates. Kyoko, trained to doubt emotion, learns to trust Makoto because of how he sees the world. Her decision to follow her heart, even when it jeopardizes her life, becomes the clearest sign of Makoto's influence. In this way, Danganronpa becomes a metaphor for life itself. Brutal, unfair, confusing, but never meaningless. So long as one keeps choosing to move forward. The truth may hurt, but what comes after determines whether we succumb to despair or rise into something stronger. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about hope is not its absence, but its distortion. Nagito Komaeda carries the same title as Makoto, yet stands as his perfect inverse, a mirror cracked down the middle, where one finds hope in humanity's gentle faith in itself, the other wields hope as a divine blade, cutting through compassion in service of something greater and more terrible. His ultimate lucky student badge gleams with the same light as Makoto's, but at what cost? Especially in a story where hope should be salvation, not suffering. Nagito might be the most tragic figure in the series. While some might offer hope as comfort, the moments that Danganronpa 2 explores through Nagito are not born of love, but acts of ideological violence. They are necessary responses to overwhelming self-loathing. When faced with a world that seems to demand worthiness, there's only to prove, serve, or surrender. But when proving leads to isolation and serving requires sacrifice, the only way to maintain purpose is to become the enemy. To freeze yourself in place as the villain so others might shine. Both Nagito and Junko are absolutists, driven by ideology rather than sympathy. Where Junko exalts despair as the only honest truth, Nagito worships hope with equal fervor. So much so that his devotion distorts it into something indistinguishable from despair. To kill for despair is unforgivable to him, but violence, betrayal, even death can be justified if done for hope's sake. While Junko creates despair for its own purpose, Nagito promotes despair as hope's purifying crucible. His actions in the first trial reveal this twisted logic, where he's willing to plunge everyone into despair to force them to rise, believing that the more he breaks them, the brighter their hope will shine. Like Junko, he strips others of their agency in service of some greater truth. But where Junko wants to destroy meaning, Nagito wants to die for it. At the same time, not all hope is equal. The students stumble and fall as wandering souls seeking their place in a world that demands certainty, while they're still discovering what hope truly means. Before them stands their compass, a figure who lives her ideals despite overwhelming artificiality, guiding the lost she has taken in towards something authentic. Chiaki Nanami represents Nagito's inverse. She believes people are worth saving exactly as they are. Introduced as a soft-spoken gamer, seemingly passive and peripheral, she grows through her shared emotional experience. Her development is achingly human despite being an AI. She consistently steps in when others are lost during the class trials, providing clarity. Chiaki's character arc demonstrates 3 forms of love-driven guidance. In Chapter 1, she volunteers to guard Monokuma's party lodge, remaining calm when panic erupts and offering her classmates stability. This protective instinct evolves into active guidance when she leads Hajime through the Twilight Syndrome game in Chapter 2, using her gaming expertise to uncover crucial evidence. Her distress over Mahiru's murder reveals that her help stems from genuine care for her friends. Her guidance becomes more direct in Chapter 4's Funhouse, where she prevents Hajime from entering the final dead room, and serves as unofficial navigator through the maze. She provides direction when others are lost, embodying hope that acts through service. While the wandering souls remain directionless, the navigator watches over them. But the lost cannot stay dependent forever. As they find their bearings, they may feel a pull to give something back, to offer their own hand to steady the one who steadied them. Even the navigator, though steadfast in purpose, is moved by those who follow. In the end, guidance becomes a journey walked side by side, where both the guide and the guided leave their mark on the trail. Nagito had every right to try and test his classmates. He was a brilliant strategist, and after discovering in Chapter 4 that both he and his classmates were actually remnants of despair, individuals who had fallen into despair to carry out Junko's will, he became convinced that he had grown stronger in his convictions. Despite them all having forgotten their memories and currently existing in a virtual world known as the Neo World program, he no longer believed they could carry forward the mantle of hope. Instead, he wanted to defer that hope to the traitor among them, to the one who had infiltrated their group, not to destroy, but to save. But he was still lost, and like any wandering soul, he made mistakes. Chapter 5 becomes his ultimate testament, where he orchestrates an elaborate suicide and crafts an unsolvable murder to expose a traitor. Driven by his belief that genuine hope must be born from overcoming despair, he sacrifices himself so that ultimate hope can prevail, even at the cost of his classmates' lives. But this conceals something deeper. Nagito cannot accept that he is redeemable. In his own mind, he cannot help but be the villain. He perceives his death as certainty because someone as worthless as him could never truly be a part of hope. The lost student who fancied himself a harbinger of hope challenged the others to prove their worth. Yet it was Chiaki's quiet strength that gave them the courage to decide for themselves. While she was hesitant to reveal her true nature as a traitor, they needed her guidance. She had to reconcile her own dual identity by participating in what would be her final trial. The game becomes a series of connections, wandering souls learning to care in defiance of the roles they were given. Nagito's devotion turned him into something other than human, while Chiaki's love turned her into something more. His trials pushed them to grow, and like any test, the challenge itself mattered less than the choices they made in response. These choices were shaped by the people who stood beside them rather than by abstract ideals. While Nagito manipulates, Chiaki never does. Her reveal as a traitor in Chapter 5 is tragic precisely because she accepts her fate without resistance. She doesn't plead for her life or shift blame. Instead, she continues protecting the group, pushing them to keep believing in each other even as she faces deletion. The group's reluctance to vote for her testifies to the quiet hope she cultivated all along. Nagito's self-loathing drives him to destroy himself for a higher cause. Chiaki, on the other hand, doesn't hate herself. She never places herself at the center of attention. She never views herself as savior or symbol. Her humility is rooted in quiet self-understanding. She sees value in people even at their worst, continuing to engage with Fuyuhiko after Peko's trial, reaching out to Nagito despite his erratic nature, supporting Akane after her violent outbursts. She never tries to fix her classmates. She simply believes in them until they start believing in themselves. Nagito cannot imagine a world where he deserves hope, and he seeks to prove its value through suffering. By this logic, the very act of caring must be proven worthy through pain. Where Nagito believes hope must be earned, Chiaki quietly insists it can be given. She never claims to be hope itself, yet becomes its very embodiment by offering compassion without condition. This is where they most starkly diverge. Chiaki acknowledges that hope needs despair to be recognized, but instead of weaponizing that interdependence, she uses it to nurture hope entirely. Her presence collapses the boundary between hope and love, making worthiness itself irrelevant. The limits of devotion are key, because Danganronpa 2 is not a story of blind faith, but of earned grace. While Nagito had no capacity for self-love, freeing his shoulders from the burdens that ground the others, Chiaki carries her own weight differently. She didn't set out to become anyone's savior. She set out to be their friend. And the living must come to understand their own resilience by learning when to draw upon the love that surrounds them. Hope demands more than avoiding hardship. It requires recognizing when sacrifice serves a greater purpose, and finding the resolve to face that choice united. The time may come when the wandering souls become confident enough to find their way without the navigator. Yet reaching that point demands a winding process of discovery, for only after experiencing love can they begin to chart their own course. For the survivors of Goodbye Despair, this moment of testing arrives in their final trial. This comes after the revelation that their entire world is virtual, that they are actually in pods in the real world, with their minds synchronized to the Neo World program. More shocking still, they discover they are the 15 rescued students from Hope's Peak Academy, who are also the remnants of Ultimate Despair, former terrorists responsible for killing friends and family, committing self-torture, and helping usher in the collapse of global society. The trial puts the survivors in a position where the future asks them to risk their past without a clean solution. Facing the AI version of Junko, they must choose between 3 impossible options: to graduate, where they return to the real world with their virtual personas intact, but risk Junko's AI escaping to infect the world through the corpses of their dead friends; to repeat, where they remain trapped in the virtual simulation forever; or to activate the shutdown protocol, where they destroy Junko's AI, but erase all their virtual experiences, and awaken as their original remnant of despair selves with no memory of their growth. Junko confronts the cast with a piercing question. What is the worth of hope if it demands the sacrifice of everything you've come to know and feel? Her challenge is direct, almost sincere. If the hope they choose erases everything they felt and fought through, does it still count as hope? The question lingers in every line she speaks. Junko points out that shutting down the Neo World program will erase the experiences, growth, and relationships the characters formed in the virtual world. She presents the shutdown as an end that devours all meaning. Moreover, she appeals to their isolation. The world may never come to care for them, seeing them only as remnants of ultimate despair. She wants them to view their decision as self-annihilation. Will you be able to endure such despair? Who are you going to endure it for? If no one will validate your struggle, is it still worth struggling for? And if no one remembers, did it matter? This directly confronts the philosophical foundation of hope. This scenario weaponizes ambiguity. The players don't know what shutdown truly means going forward. They only know that it is irreversible, that it may mean death, and that it will, certainly, mean the erasure of all they've experienced. Junko has constructed a scenario where every path contains loss. To graduate is to escape into the real world, corrupted and unchanged. To repeat is to surrender and start again, possibly forever. To shut down is to leap into the unknown, discarding their virtual growth. The students are frozen because they fear change itself. Thematically, this not choosing represents a fear that undergirds the entire series. The fear that ideals like hope and despair, when removed from the lived individual human experience, become hollow. The lost students are paralyzed not because they don't possess strength, but because they find the available ideals insufficient. Hope feels fake if it demands erasure. Despair is unacceptable because it celebrates destruction. The weight of this paradox forces the cast and the player to reassess what hope truly means. Junko here poses real questions about moral legitimacy. If the world doesn't care about your suffering, why should you save it? Why endure pain for strangers who may never even know you exist? She embodies a worldview that sees hope as a kind of performative delusion. It is useful in an idealistic world, yet brittle in the face of existential loss. Her words cut deep because they are partly true. Grand ideals can alienate and erase the self, as seen with Nagito. And yet, they still choose to shut down. They choose to delete the program, despite knowing it will mean the loss of their shared world. They choose a hope that does not offer comfort and instead demands risk. This is not a naive hope, however. It is not the shallow optimism Junko mocked in the first game. Instead, this hope is an assertion of agency. Even if I lose my memories, I will not lose the self that chose this. Chiaki's influence reminds them that the bonds that they formed, while soon to be erased from memory, shape them in ways that endure. Hope, in this context, is about intent rather than outcomes. Nowhere is this clearer than in Hajime himself. Hajime, the main protagonist, begins the game as a blank slate. He is the ultimate question mark, plagued by insecurity and amnesia. His arc is a meditation on self-doubt and the desperate desire to be someone, to possess worth. That desire is twisted when it's revealed he is also Izuru Kamakura, an artificial construct created by Hope's Peak Academy's Hope Cultivation Project, engineered to be the ultimate hope, a being of pure talent stripped of emotion, personality, and identity. As a reserve course student, one of the ordinary students who paid to attend Hope's Peak without an ultimate talent, Hajime had volunteered for the experimental project, literally erasing his original self to become Izuru. This revelation births his true existential crisis. Hajime is caught between two extremes: the flawed, ordinary person he believes himself to be, and the emotionless perfection he once chose to become. His decision to reject both Junko and Izuru becomes the linchpin of the finale. Hajime leads the shutdown with conviction, choosing to move forward as himself, imperfect, uncertain, but human. This choice emerges from the lessons of those around him. Chiaki taught him that caring is worthwhile, even when you're afraid. Nagito showed him how ideals, when disconnected from people, become dangerous. When Nagito learned the truth about their identities as remnants of despair, his obsession with hope consumed him completely. He tried to kill them all in Hope's name, even severing his own arm to replace it with Junko's. Junko herself exposed how despair thrives when certainty crumbles. Through these lessons, Hajime finds a third path: to live by will rather than by talent or ideology. This resolution gives emotional closure to the Chiaki, Hajime, Nagito dynamic. Nagito idolized a divine external form of hope, a distant destination that justified any cruelty in pursuit of it. Chiaki believed in quiet interpersonal hope, the trust that small, meaningful choices can change people, like a steady compass that never demands, yet always guides. Hajime integrates both, forging a version of hope rooted in uncertainty and self-determination. He doesn't honor Chiaki by preserving the world she lived in. He honors her by becoming the person she believed he could be. And crucially, he doesn't make this choice for her alone. Chiaki didn't want blind loyalty. She wanted him to choose a future he could live and believe in, and would be proud of himself for choosing. The shutdown is his answer. It is the choice he makes because it reflects a self he can finally accept. Hajime's arc resolves a deeper tension within Danganronpa's world, the illusion of being extraordinary. Unlike Makoto, whose story was about finding strength in ordinariness, Hajime's journey is about the destruction that comes from chasing exceptionalism. He wasn't born special, and he hated himself for it. His final battle is against himself, his fractured identities, his past, and the roles others want him to play. When he confronts his own nihilism and despair in the void of subspace, supported by Chiaki's encouragement to believe in himself and create a new path forward, he chooses to become something new. This act is more radical than any defeat of despair. It is a refusal to live by binaries. He chooses to be a human rather than being the world's hope or its destroyer. He becomes someone flawed, real, and most importantly, free. The game's stance on hope then is clear. True hope is not guaranteed success, nor is it the preservation of comfort. True hope is the willingness to move forward even when the world is indifferent. It is the decision to act, even when no one will witness it. In this way, Danganronpa 2 positions hope as existential, a personal commitment to becoming, rather than a reaction to external validation. This thematically counters Junko by refusing to let despair monopolize truth. While she correctly identifies the cost of action, she mistakenly assumes that suffering nullifies meaning. The shutdown decision argues the opposite, that meaning arises because of the willingness to choose, especially when there is no certainty. The wandering souls transcend her game by making a choice she never could, to let go of control, of certainty, of memory, and still move forward. The ending reinforces this message. Back in the real world, Hajime and the other survivors choose to remain on Jabberwock Island, helping to care for their classmates who remain in comas. They choose to do what they believe is right. In the end, the final trial becomes their ultimate navigation test. No compass can guide them through this choice, not even Chiaki's memory. They must chart their own course into the unknown, carrying only the internal direction she helped them discover. The shutdown is a graduation from needing external guidance. They have learned to navigate by their own moral constellation, one that Chiaki helped them at but could never draw for them. The beauty of this resolution lies in its acknowledgement that true navigation requires eventual independence from even the most trusted guides. Chiaki's greatest gift was her patient belief that they could find their own without her. The wandering souls, in choosing shutdown, prove her faith was not misplaced. They may lose their memories of the journey, yet they carry within them the capacity to navigate, a skill that transcends any single map or destination. The final trial deconstructs the ideals of hope and despair and reconstructs them on the foundation of agency and existential courage. While Junko is not wrong to question the cost of hope, the game argues she is wrong to believe that cost makes it worthless. Sometimes, the noblest act of hope is the one that leaves no trace yet changes everything. Sometimes, the most meaningful journey is the one where you must abandon the map and trust your own sense of direction. The wandering souls become navigators in their own right because they choose to walk forward into the unknown together, rather than because they found the perfect path.